Hello everyone, Zelrinth here, and today we're going to take a look at a unit that everybody knows quite well, and actually already has, at least the normal version, which is Rawiyah, but we're going to be looking at her alternate version that we will be receiving later in the game when the new faction, the Crimson Knights, comes out. The big difference between this Rawiyah and the normal one is she is a Seeker rather than a Breaker. And her factions are slightly different. She's actually not part of this sort of Convallaria faction because this is a prequel to her original self. It takes place back when she was in the academy with the other members of the Crimson Knights faction. She is part of the normal area faction like her original self. She is part of the Crimson Knight faction, which is the faction that she is the first member that we will receive in it, and all the units after her will also be included in it, and this includes like the alternate Safiya, and Tristan, which is the Union officer, among some others that we'll be going over after her. And then she is also part of the Aggression faction. So let's go ahead and take a look at her trait. At 1 star, after a range attack hit, so anything that's range, she can take another action, so act again, and she's subject to the debuff Exhausted. And what Exhausted is a debuff that cannot trigger her personality's action, which means to take action again. So she won't be able to just continuously take action over and over and over again, doing ranged attacks. This cannot be dispelled and immunized, so you can't make her immune to this so that she can infinitely spam attacks. But each time a skill deals damage to an enemy, she also gains 1 layer of this buff called Vitality, or Vigor, and this is a mark, and each layer that she has of this increases her critical strike rate by 1%. This cannot be dispelled. You can't be made immune to it. And additionally, for every 10 layers, damage increases by 10%. At 20 layers, critical strike damage increases by 10%. And at 30 layers, damage and critical strike damage increases by 10%. So this is something that you can stack over the course of a battle. And so and this is accounting for each time a skill deals damage to an enemy. The big thing in that is she does a lot of AOE damage, so that you can stack. This isn't just one attack, one layer. If you're hitting multiple enemies, you're stacking multiple layers of Vitality. And then your Fatigue, so this Exhausted state or debuff, lasts until the next 3 actions start. So after she has 3 actions, she will lose this Exhausted, and then she can trigger that take action again. And then at 1 star, her Vitality can be stacked up to 10 times. That's the big thing with the 10 stars, and if you know, it already says at 30 layers you can increase damage. You know, as you increase her stars here, you're going to be able to stack it higher and higher. So when you kind of look at it at the 2 stars, it increases the Vitality stack cap to 20. And I think that's just the main thing there. So at 2 stars takes it so the cap is at 20. At 3 stars, it's now that Fatigue only lasts 2 turns, so now you can take another action every 2 turns. And then at 4 stars, it now increases your stack limit to 30. And then it adds that for each additional enemy damaged by her skill, she got another stack of Vitality on top of that. And then finally, at her 5 stars here, the big thing that you'll see is that it reduces the Fatigue only last until next action. So now she's going to be able to do this take action again every other turn. So that's massive there, in that she's going to be able to take actions constantly. You're not having to wait on that Fatigue as long. And then at the start of battle, you'll start with 10 layers of Vitality. So she's immediately starting with that damage increased by 10%. And so she can actually get this to 30 stacks fairly quickly. So she is definitely a unit that you want to get to 5 stars. She just gets better and better as you increase them. Alright, let's go ahead and take a look at her skills here, and kind of want to take into account her trait and how these skills will be useful to her trait overall. So with her initial skill here, she starts right off the bat with a good skill. It's an AOE physical damage skill that deals 65% area damage to all enemies within 3 squares of the player's range. And after attacking, this skill will switch to Frenzy's Wind of Determination. This is a 2 energy cost skill. And then when we look at Frenzy Wind's Determination skill, it's a very similar one, but instead of being a 3 grid area, it's going to be a 2 square area, but this one deals 85% versus the 65%. And then when she does this one, it switches back to the original. So this skill switches back and forth between these 2 skills. Now, when you take into account her trait, right off the bat, if you were to use this skill, you're going to be able to hit the enemies. It's going to switch to the other, but then you'll be able to act again and do it right off the bat again. So we can kind of take a look at that in action. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the skill in practice. So you'll be able to see her move into place. And then she will do her first initial attack, which starts with a 3 range 65% damage. That's going to hit all of these enemies within 3 grids of her. And then immediately it's going to go into that 2 ranged one that's going to hit the ones in front of her here. Just these ones, because that's only 2 grid range, so that third one doesn't get hit by that. But then she's immediately able to act again based on her trait. So right off the bat, she starts with a great skill in this AOE, and then she gets to act again after using it. When you look at her other initial skill, this is very similar to the one that the normal Rawiyah has, which is Have a Drink. It's an instant that restores 60% of her lost HP. She gains the skill Tipsy, or the buff Tipsy. She has armor piercing, as well as armor piercing that lasts for 2 rounds, and then gains 10 layers of vitality. So this is a way to instantly get a bunch of stacks right on her right off the bat with this Tipsy. Alright, when we take a look at her rank 1 skills, the first one we'll see here is Swift Rend Broken Sky. This one's a passive that after actively dealing physical damage to an enemy, you'll deal 15% damage to all enemies within 2 squares of the caster, so within 2 squares of her, and then it'll apply a random level 2 attribute debuff to them as well. And this lasts for 2 rounds. And this can be triggered up to 3 times per round, and if you already know with her trait having her ability to go again, this is something where you can easily get 3 level 2 debuffs on enemies. A big part of her kit is AOE, as we see as we get farther into her kit. She's hitting lots of enemies all over the place. And then this one, so this is a core skill I think that you'll want to put in her kit a lot of the time. Just because it's a great way to get a lot of debuffs on the enemies, as well as doing an additional 15% damage to them as well. Then we look at her other rank one. This is a physical damage instant skill. So an instant, so that's a good way to get more damage out there for this passive itself. So this is another area where you're probably going to want to use a Castella on her. So it's select a location within 3 grids of a cross range and perform a charge attack. This charge attack deals 15% damage to enemies within the path and steal 1 buff from them. When hitting the enemy, the cooldown of the skill is reduced by 1 round, and the next time you release an active skill, the damage is increased by 15%. So this is just another way to do a little bit of damage to the enemies. You can take the buff from them. Depending on how many enemies there are, you can reduce the cooldown of the skill. So this skill has a cooldown of 3. But for each enemy hitting, you can reduce it. So you can almost make this an every turn skill to an extent. And then it makes it where your next skill does an additional 15% damage. Alright, I have it up and ready. One thing you're going to notice with this skill when we see it is it's got other parts of her kit as well kind of involved. So you'll kind of see a little bit of an additional parts going in that we'll get to when we get farther into her skill tree. Now this one, you'll actually see both of her rank 1 skills in action because both the passive and the instant are in this. So you'll see that additional AOE 15% damage and adding of the debuffs to the enemies after the attack. So it comes in, does the charge, does damage on the charge, and then you're going to see that that passive additional AOE. Boom, that's the additional AOE putting the debuffs on the enemies that you can see over here on this side. So overall, both of her rank 1 skills are really good, and I would absolutely use the Castella to get both of them. Alright, so when we look at the rank 3 skills, both of these to me are not actually as good as, say, other units' rank 3 skills. They both have their uses, but to me they're not core parts of her actual kit. So the first one we have is Mobile Team. This is a passive that increases her speed by 100 points. And before attacking, if the target's speed is slower than hers, the damage caused is increased by 10% and it'll ignore their reaction skill. So this will have some use against certain enemies that have those reactions. And then she's going to be faster than a lot of people with the skill because it just increases her speed by 100%. But this is utilizing one of your skill slots for a passive that's it's very situational, in my opinion, on that one. Especially when you look at her other level 3 skill, and I think this one will have a lot more value to all-around power of adversity enemies. And that'll be a debuff that's an instant. It applies Imprison to the enemy. Attack mine down 2. Removes the ability to do an assist, and then it lasts for 2 turns. And if the target is already has imprisoned, it'll apply a stun for an additional 2 turns, and this can be used 2 times. So this can only be used 2 times in a match, but this is a massive CC to the enemies to kind of prevent them from doing anything. So if the enemies are not immune to this, this is an absolutely great skill. I mean, you can see the one negative being that some of the bosses, especially in Tower of Adversity, are probably going to be immune to this. But if I had to selected the 2 level 3 skills, this would be the one to go, because this will have a lot of value if it's just an enemy that you're not going to be able to kill really quickly, that you just want to lock down so they're not going to do anything while you kind of clear out some of the other fodder. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at her level 5 reaction skills now. So the first one here is Emergency Hedging. This one is when attack damage reduced by 8%. And after being actively attacked, when you are in the near-death state, you gain dodge, which can take effect once per round at most, and last for 1 round. Now, this one is kind of situational because you have to be in the near-death state, but then you do get dodge, which so means you're going to have a lot of tankiness in the near-death state every round because you can take 1 hit. But when we look at our other reaction skill, it's just significantly better in every way than that I couldn't see any reason that you wouldn't want to use this one over it. So the I am angry reaction, she possesses Unyielding, and Unyielding is the skill where Alexi has this skill. So when she is defeated, she will come back to life with 1 health. But then there's an additional part to this, is that when an ally is defeated, and this is not a translation error, that is when an ally is defeated, so anybody within your team is defeated, you'll restore all of her health, and then she gains damage about +3 and damage reduction 3 for 2 turns. And so we'll kind of take a look at this in video. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at this reaction in practice. So you're going to actually see a lot of value of how this and how you can really abuse this skill. So it's going to be very quick in the video, kind of showing it happening, but it is quite obvious that it applies when an ally is defeated, and it's not a translation error like we see with some other units. So it's going to show here right off the bat, you're going to see this is a Hangman. When a Sophia summoned Hangman, they've just been defeated, so you're going to see them drop their bomb here, like they do at the end of their attack. As soon as they drop it, so it has their buff dropping, and then as soon as they die here, you're going to look in the top left here at her. You're going to see her do her heal, so this is the full heal happening to herself, and then you're going to see the damage 3 and damage reduction 3 being applied over here. And so you can see that heal, it takes a second here, but you saw that, and then it drops the heal. And then in this video, it does show that like your best units that you're going to have with her that can trigger that was Safia, Inanna, and then you have a Convallaria here. And then it's going to just show it a couple more times in practice and how it works really well. So you have another one where the Hangman is dying. He's going to die. And then you're going to see her triggering her buff as well as the heal. And then right here it's kind of showing that she has the attack 3, the defense 3, and then she was fully healed up from it. So overall, that reaction is above and beyond the other one in so many ways, just because it makes it where she can actually be a very, very good tank, even being a Seeker. Because you can pretty much keep this damage reduction up at all times because it lasts for 2 turns. And if you have someone like Inanna, Safia, or even a Convallaria, like a Convallaria especially because they can keep summoning, as soon as they get defeated, she gets this buffs. And so she can almost always have that damage 3 and damage reduction self on her. And then you have that paired with all her AOE attacks, she can do some pretty significant damage within her team. Alright, so when we look at her level 7 skills, so here on the right we have Swift Wind, Sharp Blade. This one's a passive that when the movement plus her charge distance, so she's moved on the map something 4 squares or greater, 1 energy will be restored. And then after attacking, if the target she attacks is defeated, she'll additionally increase her energy by another 1, so she can get 2 energy from the skill. And this can only be affected once per round. So you can't, since she can go again multiple times, you can't just keep triggering this and really buff up her energy. But this can be a passive that can be very useful for her, simply because she can act again and she can be constantly acting. And a lot of these skills have energy cost to them. Like this one right here costs 2 energy. So if you do that twice in a row, you're using 4 energy right there. So this one can be very important depending on your needs for energy and what skills you're using on a map. So this one is a pretty good one to pick on your level 7. But then again, when you look at her other level 7 skill, Swift Wind, Sword, Chaotic Light, This one's a physical damage skill that deals 25% damage 3 times to all enemies within a 5x3 area in the target direction. So you can see down in the grid the target direction. And after actively releasing any skill once, the damage of the skill increases 30 to 35% 3 times rather than the 25%. And then after actively releasing any skill twice, this can be increased to 50% 3 times, and the effect lasts until the end of the action. So this is a way where she's using multiple skills in her turns, where she can use this as kind of her finishing skill, and then do 150% damage to a 3x5 grid. So this can be a very good like ultimate finisher move to use at the end of her turn. Now this one costs 4 energy, and like I said, she can get very, very energy heavy on needs if you're constantly spamming these skills. But this is one where you can do a massive amount of damage to a large group of enemies, especially if you're pairing it with something like the Swift Wind Broken Sky. Alright, we're going to go ahead and take a look at this skill in use. So it's going to actually show it doing the maximum amount of damage. So she's going to do 2 attacks first to get that all the way up to the 150% damage or 50% damage 3 times. So first it's going to attack this first mite, then she's going to attack the second one up here, and then she's going to AoE the other ones at the top. So first she hits him with her first skill, then she does the AoE, hitting the other one in the left, and then she goes up and she goes to this skill. You can see the large area that it's going to hit, and then you can see that it's doing massive amounts of damage. It's going to clear all these enemies, and if you had a bunch of enemies in all these grids, it's going to hit every single one of them for 150% physical damage. That's the big thing about her kit, is she does massive amounts of AoE damage. And it just looks pretty cool in that skill overall. Here's another one, and that's on the PvP map. It only showed it for a second, but on the PvP map, if all the enemies are bunched up like they like to do on that bridge, you're going to just wipe them in one hit with that attack there. Alright, we're going to go ahead and take a look at her basic attacks here. This first one here is Power Strike. This is just a normal causes 110% physical damage attack within a Gwen range. This one is really nothing special. This is not the one I would select when it comes to picking which one to pick here. So the one on the left is called Take My Punch. This is a single target attack that causes 85% physical damage, knocks the enemy back 1 square, and then after attacking, the skill changes to Get Lost, and the skill lasts for 2 turns. So this one it's a little bit weaker, but it does a knockback to it, and then it has another skill built into it. So after she uses it, it switched to this other skill called Get Out of Here, and so then it's select an enemy within the cross range. So this one has a cross range of 1 to 3 outside of her range, and she'll charge the enemy and deal 110% physical damage and then knock them back 2 squares. When the collision occurs, the target is stunned for 1 round, and after the attack, it switches back to that original attack to Take My Punch. So this one, when it switches, it does that same 110% damage, but now you're able to stun the enemy, and you can knock them back 2 squares. So just outright, the Take My Punch skill is significantly better than just doing 110% physical damage. I don't see a situation where you're going to want this one over the left one. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but this one's just the go-to, and I don't even see wasting Mechastella on the other one. So when we look at the top 11th level skills here, the one on the left is a support. This one is just an evasion support skill. It reduces the area damage that she receives by 50%, and then it grants 2 dodge for 2 turns, so she can dodge 2 attacks. Plus, with that massive reduction to area damage, this makes her quite tanky. But I couldn't see myself really using this much, especially in the PvE type situations, just because she has so much else in her kit, and she's more about going out and doing damage versus avoiding it like this. And then she has like her reaction skill that can give her a massive damage reduction by itself anyway. So then when we look at her other level 11 skill, it's a physical damage single target attack causing 130% damage. But before attacking, the critical hit rate is increased by 15%. And after successfully defeating the target, she gets 3 energy points restored. So this is a quick way, if you're in a fight where you know you're going to need a little bit of extra energy, this might be one to throw on her kit just to give her that extra energy. But I think this one might be between this one and the Swift Wind Sharp Blade. It would kind of be situational, but of these two, I'm going to want this one anyway. So this is the easy one to pick there, and then just if the situation arises where you need it, this would be the skill to go with. All right, then we'll look at one last thing that it's not part of her kit, but it's kind of unique to we're going to kind of look at with all the future units after her, which is the signature weapons that are specifically designed for the unit. So with her, this is going to be her best in slot weapon, and that is the Swift Wind Sword. And this is one that at 1 star, it increases physical attack by 2%, and after attacking, increases critical damage by 9% until the end of action. So the big thing with this one is she can do multiple attacks within her turn. So what makes it so good for her is she's going to get that critical damage on all her follow-up attacks after her first one. If you can get this one all the way up to 5 stars, it increases her physical attack by 10%, and then it's a 21% increase to critical damage on her. So an outright great weapon for her. And so that is my in-depth look at the alternate Rawiyah. An outright amazing unit, as you can see, does a lot of AOE damage and has the potential, if you're actually a spender, where you may want to get a signature weapon to 5 stars to do even more damage, especially with her crit capabilities. She is a unit that I will definitely be pulling for. Now, there is the one negative, is that when you start looking at the units coming after her, there's other really good units, especially when it comes to signature weapons coming after her as well. So if you have someone like Sophia, but you skip a Gust, you may want to skip her to save for Tristan, who is kind of another kind of a replacement / similar to a Gust in that situation. Because if you have Sophia, you already have a really good Seeker, so you may be looking for a really good Breaker. We'll kind of have to see when I start looking and going into the in-depth kits of the future characters. But outright, she is a great DPS, and it's kind of the signs where you're starting to see where the units are starting to power creep the older ones, especially when you start getting into the signature weapons. But yeah, that is my video, and if you liked my content, if you could like, comment, and subscribe, I will continue to do all of the units all the way up to the current one that's available, which is Levita. And then after that, I'll just keep up with them as they come out. But thanks for watching.